Serling is a first-person journey exploring the life and legacy of one of television's most visionary storytellers, Rod Serling. Told almost entirely in Serling's own words, drawn from never-before-heard recordings and personal dictations, the film captures the man behind the Twilight Zone in all his complexity. The film weaves archival material with atmospheric recreations that echo the eerie visual language Serling made iconic. As his unmistakable voice guides us, Serling emerges not only as a master of storytelling, but as a man grappling with his trauma of war, the moral compromises of fame, and the hope that America might one day live up to its own ideals. Serling is directed by Jonah Tullis, and he has directed films such as Console Wars and GameStop, The Rise of the Players, and Serling just debuted at the 2026 South by Southwest Film Festival. Serling is told entirely from the perspective of Rod Serling himself. Occasionally we get snippets of interviews with his wife Carol Serling, but for the most part this film is comprised mostly of recreations and interviews with Rod Serling himself on like talk shows and TV programs and stuff. So for that, like he left such an interesting life and was an interesting man, and that alone is enough to make this film entertaining and recommended. But for me, you don't really, because it's told from his perspective, he just wants you to know what he wants you to know. And his wife Carol Serling, who passed away 25 years after he did, she was a very fierce protector of his legacy. So both his wife and himself, Rod, this film is told from their perspective, and you only get to hear about him that you want to hear. So, but then again, there are a lot of interesting things we find out about him all along the way. So it's not totally uncanny, but it is a film. There are no like talking heads. There are nobody else in this film talking about him. So it is told entirely from his perspective. We follow him, the film is told entirely from news clippings and old video footage and interviews with him as well. So we see him as he grew up and he ended up going into the army, into the war, and then after the war he did radio and he wrote for radio, but radio wasn't really fulfilling for him. So he went to Hollywood and started writing for television, and then he did quite a few television shows, and eventually he created and wrote The Twilight Zone. After the success of The Twilight Zone, he won many awards for that show. He wasn't really, like during the 60s, television wasn't really daring. Like there was a lot of serious things happening in the world, like assassinations and the war in Vietnam and stuff like that. So television, they were really going for like entertaining, and they're not really going for a deep thinking type television shows. So Rod Serling, his type of TV, his writing was not really wanted at the time, and he was kind of like created a TV show called Night Gallery, but he was kind of pushed off that show. So after that he started writing for film, and I think his most iconic strip is for The Planet of the Apes, but he did write other scripts for other films such as 7 Days in May and Requiem for Heavy Ride, Patterns, Carol for Another Christmas, The Rack. So he did have quite a heavy filmography in film. If you stick with this film, the final half an hour of the film is quite interesting because you do hear from him. He's just like, he really is really outspoken about anything he was against. He wasn't afraid to speak his mind, and he was really against the war in Vietnam and what the world was at a particular time. And it does come through in his work, and it's a shame that he passed away in the mid-70s. And it's kind of a shame. I wish he kind of was born a little bit 10 years later, because I think if he had focused more on film, he would have been able to make and write and probably even direct and produce a lot of very interesting films, because he was, even though this film is told from his perspective, he wasn't afraid to tell what he was thinking. So he would have had a really interesting career in film if he was able to make the films he really wanted to do. But as I said, this documentary is entirely from the perspective of Serling, and sometimes from his wife Carol, and it really does very well, expertly combines the news footage, the musical score, and everything, all archival footage and everything combined really does make a really snappy, quick documentary that is quite entertaining, even though it left me a little bit wanting sometimes. I give Serling 3 stars out of 5. The words from Rod Serling and the archival footage and news footage and everything combined really does make a very entertaining documentary. He's a very interesting man and he led a very interesting life. But for me, I kind of wished we heard a little bit more from other people about him, because this film is entirely from his perspective. So we only hear what he wants us to know. So that film left me a little bit wanting, but it's still quite entertaining documentary. So I do recommend checking out Serling. Thanks for watching. What do you think of Serling? Please comment below what you thought of the film. See you next time. Bye.